I'm happy to in some ways to be uh, past uh, 2 Samuel chapter 13. And you'll remember from last week, it was a hard chapter about Absalom and his sister Tamar and Amnon, who is the firstborn son of David. He is the king to be as dynasties go, and so he's next in line. The throne is his when David is gone, and yet he looks at his sister, his half sister, and doesn't even want to call her sister. He calls Absalom brother, but doesn't call Tamar sister because he's distancing himself from that relationship because of what he wants to do. And of course, he does. He takes advantage of his sister. He violates her. And that leads to just cascading issues. Namely, because for David, the easiest thing for him to do was just be angry. It did not drive him to anything more meaningful. He just was angry. And that made Absalom, whose sister it was, they shared the same father and mother, Absalom was just sitting there seething. I don't know if he was hoping that anger or that rage would go away. But of course, when we let things sort of sit there, they often fester. This was an untreated wound, and it was not going to get better by leaving it alone. Something had to be done. Now, I should know better when I have a sermon topic that's going to come up. I should know better that just something is going to happen in my own life that's going to be like, okay, I was going to preach on anger, so of course something's going to happen, right? Man, when I talked about hard times one year, the trailer just had these big issues when we were meeting at a place and we couldn't get it up, and we had to drag all of our bins through the grass over there, and it was all terrible. Well, yesterday, I knew I'm preparing. I'm in my head, in my heart. When I'm getting close to Sundays, I'm just kind of like in my own head. And my wife, she'll know because she'll ask me something and I'll just look through her. She'll be like, I need your attention. I'll be like, yes. She's like, are you listening? I'm like, uh-huh. She's like, no, you're not. I'm like, yes. I'm thinking. I'm in the zone. And when I was doing that, we had a lot of things that we had to do. We drove to Wilsonville because we moved. We moved down here to Brooks, which is awesome to be closer to the community where I do ministry. And it's like, yes, we're here, but we're still kind of cleaning some stuff up in Wilsonville. We take the truck there, and I look at my son. I say, we are going to be here 10 minutes max. And my wife's like, well, don't say that. We'll try to be fast. So it's like 10 minutes max. Let's get it all in the back. Let's go. So hours later, I'm sitting there in the truck, turning the key as it just cranks. And of course, the truck says, today is the day that I no longer start. Now that you're in Wilsonville. And I'm the guy who my troubleshooting is turn it off and turn it on. And if it doesn't work, okay, I don't know what to do next. I'm stuck. I'm looking up on the internet. I'm getting mad. Now my son, here's the thing. When we were going about, he was kind of laying or sitting or whatever in that front area where my brake and the gas pedal is. And I was thinking, Rogan, did you do something? You know when things aren't going right or something happens and you don't know exactly why? Well, then you like, Rogan, what'd you do? He's like, I didn't. Did you hit the pedal? I don't know. I didn't. Rogan, were you pushing on the gas pedal the whole time? Right? Did you flood the engine? I don't know if that's even a thing with diesel. It might be. No. So I'm off course anyways. It's a diesel engine. He's like, that's not a thing. Well, That's me. I'm thinking like, Rogan, what happened? What'd you do? And it's got to be something. And eventually I just like, okay, I'm getting mad. Just getting angry. And so I'm just going to walk. I call Graham and Naomi. They live in Wilsonville. I say, hey, truck won't start. You have any ideas? If not, don't worry. I'll go get it towed or something, which in my head is like, this is the worst day ever. I want to talk slowly, because when you are angry with something, it's easy for you to be angry with somebody. It's just this natural, like you begin as a snake sort of coils into itself. If somebody else gets close, you're ready to strike. It's like, nope, I don't want to, please, I don't want to talk right now because I'm just angry. I'm the wrong guy to be stuck with a diesel truck. And everyone's like, what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. I don't know anything. He saved me. Graham saved me, by the way. He came. He's like, I don't really know anything. Anyways, here's how you fix it. You know those humble guys that are like, I don't really know anything. We're going to go and take the air filter off. We're going to go and spray this in here and go and turn the ignition. We're going to do that, and then it's going to work. Okay, there it is. I'm like, all right. So he fixed it. Thank goodness. But for me, it's a reminder that anger can be really dangerous. It really can. And wow, last week I was careful not to say like, hey, we've all dealt with this, right? Because we haven't. The Tamar, Absalom, Amnon situation and the violation there, we haven't. Some people might have something adjacent to that in their life. Some people might have something really close to that, and that's really sad and that's really hard. But a lot of us, it's not like we are always thinking that way or we're doing those things. That's really, really bad, but it started somewhere. All of this started somewhere. The lust started somewhere, and the murder started somewhere. And it's why Jesus very specifically locates the problem way, way more internal. Because we look at the external stuff and say, man, that's bad. And Jesus says, yeah, but where did it start? Man, murdering somebody, really bad, but where did it start? The violation and the acts that can happen that are sexual sin. Okay, but where did it start? And so that's why Jesus, when he's talking in Matthew chapter 5, he's giving this wonderful sermon. He talks about something that would have been really hard for everyone to hear. Really hard, because you look and you're like, man, the law can be kind of difficult. And Jesus says, yeah, but some of you have missed the purpose of the law entirely. You think it was to correct your external behavior. The law's purpose was to get you to realize that you're broken on the inside. That there's something here that is preventing you from meaningfully changing your external behavior. God came not to change what is outward, but what was inward. Because an inward change leads to outward change. That's just the reality. And so we're going to see that. But I want to read it. I'm going to read from 2 Samuel chapter 14, and we'll go through that together. So David permits Absalom to return to Jerusalem. I'm just going to remind you that Absalom killed Amnon, okay? And a lot of us are probably like, yeah, like, oh no, he killed the guy who violated his sister. Don't do that, right? There's like, I can't believe he would do that to a guy who definitely deserved it. That's kind of how we feel. Like, Amnon was terrible. What he did was terrible, and David didn't do anything, so Absalom's thinking, I am going to do it myself. Now, I want to just tell you, there's refuge cities that you could go to. That means there's an avenger of blood. If somebody kills one of your family members, you can have a blood avenger, someone who goes and says, well, that means I have a right to take your life. However, you could go to a city of refuge, and that would mean you get a trial. You're not allowed to do it, but really you only do that if like the murder was on accident. Absalom did not go to a city of refuge because this was premeditated. He wasn't like, oops, killed my brother. He was like, I brought you here because I wanted to kill you. I told my men to kill you. You need to die. It was all this premeditated murder. And you're not allowed to do that, even though many of us are thinking, and I'm going to speak to that. Many of us are thinking like, but he did deserve it, right? I'll speak to that, but I'm going to read this. So now Joab, son of Zeruiah, realized that the king longed to see Absalom. 2 years have passed. David, I guess, was a little bit over it at this time. He had mourned the loss of his son, and now he doesn't have Absalom either. He's thinking, man, this is all terrible. So Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman. He told her, pretend to be in mourning and put on garments for mourning. Don't anoint yourself with oil. Instead, act like a woman who has been mourning for the dead for some time. Go to the king and speak to him in the following fashion. Then Joab told her what to say. So we already know that this woman was given a script. It doesn't tell us why Joab wants David to reconcile with Absalom. Maybe he's just sort of a good friend. And he's thinking, hey, I can tell that you're longing for Absalom. How do I kind of give you a nudge? He's also the general of David's army. It's more likely that he's thinking, here is an area of concern in a estranged son living in a foreign land who does have some right to the throne, who could lead an uprising. Maybe it's just better if you have him on good terms. It's probably more that Joab wants David to reconcile so it's not a threat to his kingdom. And he's going to have a wise woman, it says, go and pretend that she's been mourning for a very long time. So the Tekoan woman went to the king. She bowed down with her face to the ground in deference to him and said, please help me, O king. The king replied to her, what do you want? She answered, I am a widow. My husband is dead. Your servant has 2 sons. When the 2 of them got into a fight in the field, there was no one present who could intervene. One of them struck the other and killed him. Now the entire family has risen up against your servant, saying, turn over the one who struck down his brother, so that we can execute him and avenge the death of his brother whom he killed. In so doing, we will also destroy the heir. They want to extinguish my remaining coal, leaving no one on the face of the earth to carry on the name of my husband. Her 2 kids got into a fight, and one of them killed the other. And now everyone's saying, well, the other son now deserves to die for what he did. And she's saying, but that's all I have left. That's all I have. You'll extinguish my last coal, the one to carry on my husband's name. I'll have nothing. Do you see? Despite the bad thing that he did, he's my son. And I want to keep him. Maybe you're kind of seeing what she's doing. She's trying to create a parallel between what's happening with Amnon and Absalom, with these 2 sons, just close enough to where he won't see it, but she can kind of catch him and say, hey, why aren't you doing this then? So she says this, verse 8. Then the king told the woman, go to your home. I will give instructions concerning your situation. The Tekoan woman said to the king, my lord the king, let any blame fall on me and on the house of my father, but let the king and his throne be innocent. The king said, bring to me whoever speaks to you, and he won't bother you again. She replied, in that case, let the king invoke the name of the Lord your God, so that the avenger of blood may not add to the killing. Then they will not destroy my son. He replied, as surely as the Lord lives, not a single hair of your son's head will fall to the ground. So if you're not following this, David kind of said, well, give me a little bit of time and I'll figure it out and I'll send you word. And she's basically saying, well, just give me an answer now. Can you just answer me right now and let me know? And then I want you to kind of put it on the Lord's name. I want you to make this a real big pledge that you're speaking this as the Lord would speak. And he says, you know what? Okay, not a hair of your son's head. I'll talk to him and I will make sure that nothing happens to your son. It's easy to look at this situation and say, oh, what a nice thing to do. Right, to give this woman the grace that she's seeking, the mercy for her son. But all he's hearing is really one side. In a theme that we're going to see, and I will revisit, is that forgiveness is not justice ignored. Forgiveness is justice satisfied. And the king's responsibility is to do both, and he will not. He will instead ignore justice, thinking that that is forgiveness. Real forgiveness is the satisfaction of justice. Forgiveness is just a matter of who is satisfying that debt. When I forgive somebody, and I want to be angry at them, and I want to hold it over to them, and I'm saying I will not do that. That's me taking something upon myself in order to forgive this person. It's no longer holding that, though I may want to. It's no longer saying, yeah, but remember when you did such and such? Because that's my ammo, that's my ammunition, that's the thing that I have. It's in my pocket. It's to take it out of the pocket and said, I won't use it anymore. And that's me taking something on myself in order to offer forgiveness for them. So justice satisfied needs to happen even in our forgiveness, and we'll speak to that. But you can see he just kind of gave in. Someone help me. Where did I leave off? Verse 12, thank you. Then the woman said, please permit your servant to speak to my lord the king about another matter. He replied, tell me. The woman said, why have you devised something like this against God's people? When the king speaks in this fashion, he makes himself guilty. For the king has not brought back the one who has been banished. Speaking of Absalom, certainly we must die and are like water spilled on the ground that cannot be gathered up again. But God does not take away life. Instead, he devises ways for the banished to be restored. I have now come to speak with my lord the king about this matter, because the people have made me fearful. But your servant said, I will speak to the king. Perhaps the king will do what his female servant asks. Yes, the king may listen and deliver his female servant from the hand of the man who seeks to remove both me and my son from the inheritance God has given us. So your servant said, may the word of my lord the king be my security. For my lord the king is like the angel of God when it comes to deciding between right and wrong. May the Lord your God be with you. Oh, she's flattering him. Abigail was good at that, and so is she. Flattering the king, but she said, hey, in my matter, it's very similar to yours, by the way. I'm talking about them, kind of comparing. Why haven't you brought back your son whom you banished? Right? Aren't you robbing the kingdom of an heir to the throne? You need to do that which you told me to do. And so that's the sort of trap. Now, David is not dumb. He does kind of see what's happening. So David says this in 18. Then the king replied to the woman, don't hide any information from me when I question you. The woman said, let my lord the king speak. The king said, did Joab put you up to all this? The woman answered, as surely as you live, my lord the king, there is no deviation to the right or the left from all that my lord the king has said. For your servant Joab gave me instructions. He has put all these words in your servant's mouth. Your servant Joab did this so as to change this situation. But my lord has wisdom like that of the angel of God and knows everything that is happening in the land. So yes, what a nice way to say yes. Did Joab put you up to this? You're so smart. You're like this. You're like an angel. There's like no deviation left. Or how do you do it, David? You are incredible. Yes, he did. Like all of that's true. He did. All the words weren't even mine, they were his. But you saw it. Man, you're good. You know? So, yeah, thank you. Then the king said to Joab, all right, I will do this thing. Go and bring back the young man Absalom. Then Joab bowed down with his face toward the ground and thanked the king. Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight. May my lord the king, because the king has granted the request of your servant. So Joab got up and went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, let him go over to his own house. He may not see my face. So Absalom went over to his own house and did not see the king's face. Now in all Israel, everyone acknowledged that there was no man as handsome as Absalom. From the soles of his feet to the top of his head, he was perfect in appearance. That's really the only time you're ever going to hear in the Bible that feet are attractive. And it's the sole of his feet to the top of his head. It's kind of a quick switch. Hopefully you notice that. Like, how did we go from David saying, you can't even look on my face, to be like, by the way, Absalom is really good looking. Well, the divide is here. They never are actually reconciling. So all you've actually done is brought a problem closer to home. Because if you are not reconciling with the things that are close to you, then you're just keeping hard things close to you. You're leaving more room to stew over it and to have these issues. If you're not ready to reconcile for whatever reason, you're not going to put a sticky note of the person's face on your mirror and be like, I'm really mad at this person. I'd like to think about them every day. If you are having an issue, the last thing you want to do is keep the issue at the center of your life, which is kind of what David did. You're either ready to reconcile or you're not. You brought him close and said, but you can't even look at me. What? Why am I here? Why am I here if we can't even have a relationship? But people loved Absalom. He was good looking. From the soles of his feet to the top of his head, he was perfect in appearance. When he would shave his head at the end of the year, he used to when he would shave his head at the end of every year, he used to shave his head, for it grew too long, and he would shave it. I don't know if I read that right. He used to weigh the hair of his head at 3 pounds. According to the king's weight, Absalom had 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a very attractive woman. So you notice that it said Absalom had 3 sons and 1 daughter. Here it doesn't actually name the sons. It only names the daughter, and her name is Tamar. Can't you see how important that moment was for Absalom? He named it after her. He named her after his sister, who had this terrible situation with Amnon, whom he killed, had a daughter, named her Tamar. This is not resolved. There are lots of issues here, but also this hair part, 3 pounds of hair, my goodness, that's some foreshadowing. This hair is going to matter because it's kind of a point of pride for Absalom. And if I could fast forward, just tell you, there's going to be a tree and him hanging from that tree, and that's going to lead to some bad issues. But this handsome, very nice guy, point of pride at his hair, and that's what he'll hang by. Sometimes we hang by our pride. I'm not there yet, so I don't want to jump the gun, but I did, I basically told you. But he might live. No, he dies. No. Okay. But I don't want to, that's where it's going. But the anger here, since nothing is being addressed, nothing, I'm going to walk you through the danger, the demonstration, and the duty. Okay, because there's the danger here. We see it. It's in the anger. I love Christian history. And so I study Christian history pretty extensively. And I really love kind of the Roman era of Christianity, this early boon. And if you can see as you track through at least till Constantine, you'll see that emperors go back and forth between persecuting Christians. Sometimes it's just local, sometimes it's the entire Roman Empire under the leadership of a Roman emperor. Sometimes there's co-emperors, sometimes there's tetrarchs, like 4 of them. But they would go back and forth. Sometimes like, I don't really care, but on a local scale, Christians are being persecuted. Well, there was kind of a time of peace. This was in the 3rd century. And there was an emperor who came to power because his friend, who was the emperor, died. His name was Valerian. The circumstances we aren't sure about in history, how Valerian really got into power, because it was pretty seamless. All we know is there was an assassin who wanted to kill the emperor, and so Valerian sent his army to go help, but he was too late. And when his army got there, they said, hey, you're too late. How about you be emperor? He's like, okay. And the rebels that killed the other emperor, they're like, yeah, we'll be with you now too. And they just all switch sides to Valerian, which is kind of weird, just how that worked. Like, was Valerian behind it? We don't know. However, Christians are doing okay. There's not a lot of local persecution. There's not a lot happening from the empire. And here Valerian gets into power, and he's like, I have to fix some things. All right? Their Germanic tribes are kind of coming down into Rome from Italy, but we got them kind of settled. But there's a Persian king. And it's King Shapur I. And he is coming into Antioch, into Edessa. He's wreaking havoc to the Roman Empire. And so Valerian says, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to go attack this. I'm going to get Antioch back. And he does. But before he goes, out of the blue, we have no idea why, he says, before I go, let's kill a bunch of Christians. Where'd that come from? Why? It could have been that he's like, I want to appease Roman gods, and this will help. Maybe he just wanted kind of the attention shifted to Christians for whatever reason. But before he leaves, he just starts decimating Christians in some of the most gruesome ways, right? We're talking flaying. If you don't know what that is, well, I don't look it up, but maybe just say define, right? Don't Google image. But this is terrible things that he's doing to Christians. And then he's like, all right, I'm ready. And for Christians, it's like, where did that come from? What did we do? Why'd you do that? And then he goes, and then he's successful until he decides to retreat because, those Germanic tribes are back at it. I'm going to go back. And he goes, after reclaiming Antioch, he goes back to Edessa, but they get the plague. So many of his soldiers are dying. They're weak. So the king of Persia says, now's the time to strike when they're weak. And he does. He goes and he captures Valerian. And he takes Valerian, and every single time the Persian king wants to get on his horse, he says, Valerian, come. And Valerian's, he walks out, he gets it on fours, and he's the footstool for the Persian king. And when you read Christian historians writing about they're like, oh, bummer. That's too bad that he was made to be the footstool. No, they were like, it's weird that sometimes Christians in history all of a sudden become believers in karma. You had it coming. What goes around comes around, right? You did this to Christians, and now you're the footstool. Ha ha, that's great. And then when Valerian was like, can I get out of this? Please, I'm a king. I'm an emperor. I'll pay a ransom. Valerian, this is what Valerian said. Well, the Persian king said, no. And he flays him, takes his skin, tans it, and then stuffs it and just keeps it around. And Christians, especially if you read a guy by the name of Lactavius, unfortunate name, but he is loving it. And it is 100% in all of us to love seeing the people we perceive as deserving it just getting it. And so when Absalom kills Amnon, we're going to get off to a wrong start here in 14 if we are also saying he had it coming. When we want the worst thing to happen to the worst people, we are not being examples of what Christ did for us on that cross. What we should want is for even the worst of us to be reconciled to God. If the reading that we had together was 2 Corinthians 5:16 through 18, I want to read just the end of it. It says, the old life is gone. A new life has begun. And all of this is a gift from God who brought us back to himself through Christ. And God has given us the task of reconciling people to him. That's the task, reconciling people to him. But if we look at people and say, yeah, but that person's probably too far gone, so how about we just hope for the worst in that person? And we rejoice when people get it. Ashley is really good at, I said, listening to songs and hearing things. There was a country song that was playing, and Ashley said, as we were driving, she's like, I really hope that's not true. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, listen to this. This is what it says. It's a Toby Keith song. Anyone like Toby Keith? Yeah. Okay. Literally no hands went up, if you're wondering. I want to read you. I just want to read you the lyrics to this song. Okay. It's Look at Me. I don't remember what it's called. I'm sure you'll see it. But it says this. Part of the first verse. Besides, you had too many boyfriends to mention, and I played my guitar too loud. How do you like me now? Well, that's the name of the song. How do you like me now that I'm on my way? Do you still think I'm crazy standing here today? I couldn't make you love me, but I always dreamed about living in your radio. How do you like me now? Yeah, okay. Like she kind of wasn't nice to him, maybe kind of spurned his affection early. And he's like, well, how do you like me now, right? But listen to this next verse, okay? First, it's like, okay, I can see that. He's like, I bet you like me now that I'm on the radio. Okay. When I took off to Tennessee, I heard that you made fun of me. Never imagined I'd make it this far. Then you married into money, girl. Ain't it a cruel and funny world? He took your dreams and he tore them apart. He never comes home and you're always alone. And your kids hear you cry down the hall. Alarm clock starts ringing. Who could that be singing? It's me, baby, with your wake-up call. How do you like me now? How do you like me now? I'm like, whoa, like, aren't you miserable? Your husband doesn't love you. Your kids hear you cry all the time. Ha! How do you like me now? That got way dark. But it's a country song, so you're like, yeah, right? It sounds great. And then you listen to the lyrics, you're like, that's so morbid and mean. So mean. To look at somebody in their grief and their hurt and say, yeah, but you were not nice to me in high school. That's in high school. Nobody's nice. And then now you're like, down the road, now that your life is miserable, I'm singing, thinking of you and how miserable you are, and just like want to just take the salt and just rub it into that wound. If that is in your heart, I'll tell you right now, God wants that to change. That's a part of what is old in you. There's this oldness and there's this newness. You know, when I'm talking to the kids at school, sometimes I talk about things that could happen. You know, I'm a pastor at a church, and if you were to imagine that I was like, you know, guys, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to bring two young people on stage, and they're just going to talk because I think they like each other, you know. So I'm going to play matchmaker. We're going to bring them on stage, and we're going to watch them sort of have their first speed date. All of you should already be like, that's super weird. Like, why would he do that? And then they begin to talk, and they're flirting. You're like, oh, it's weird, but no, it's kind of adorable too. And kind of their first date, and they start to flirt, and then maybe the guy, we'll call him Eric, he uses the Lord's name in vain, and then you're like, well, that shouldn't. Hopefully, you're like, oh, that really shouldn't happen in church, right? And then she kind of responds, and then their language kind of come out and they start using some curse words, and I'm just over here like, oh, isn't this great, guys? And you're probably a little unsettled now. They're using some words that in church, really, right? And then kind of crude. Maybe he's like, hey, can you spin around for me, right? And then here's like the drop. And then I say, and then when they start to take their clothes off, and everyone's like, whoa! And I'm like, no, hear me out. They're really tactful in how they do it. Like, you don't actually see anything. The light work is great. Like, the shadows hit. And you don't really see it, and it drops, and they cover it. Like, you see a lot of skin, but you don't see anything explicit, and the way they turn. And you can tell something's happening, but you don't actually really see it. So there's a lot of imagination work there, but there's a lot of skin. Everyone is like, I'm so bothered by that. See, but sometimes it takes imagining something happening at church for you to realize that when it's at church, it's filthy. It's not good. It's wrong. But outside of church, when it's on your screen, it's entertainment. And when we are seeing at church what is new, because you're saying, I learn what the newness looks like at church, and it doesn't mix well with oldness. So you have to be really intentional about asking yourself, when you are outside these walls and you're not at church, is there too much oldness where there should be newness? Are you bothered by the things that would bother you if it were happening at church? See, unfortunately, some of the things that really have our attention and really have us thinking it's okay are the things of the world. Greater is he that is in you than he of the world. And you have to be able to recognize the oldness that we should have let die already so that we can experience the newness that Christ has for us. Anger that leads to festering hatred is old. It is part of what is old, and it is part of what should die. And that song, that Toby Keith song, that's just normal. Of course, we almost want that for people. What we should want more than anything else is that even the worst of us be reconciled to God. What does it look like to look at someone like Valerian, who just persecuted these Christians, and say, man, I hope that they turn back to God, right? Love your enemy. Pray for those who persecute you. That's the call of Jesus. Jesus, I'm going to read Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. He says, you have heard that it was said to an older generation, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subjected to judgment. But I say to you that anyone who is angry with a brother will be subjected to judgment, and whoever insults a brother will be brought before the council, and whoever says fool, the word there is raka, will be sent to a fiery hell. Now that fool doesn't translate well. Some have said raka, some have just said fool, and the reason is raka actually has tone to it as well. And it's hard to communicate tone. Like when you say it, it's like from the depths of you. It's from hatred. It's from malice. It's from, I don't like you at all. There's tone to that word. So fool will be sent to fiery hell. So then, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your gift. Reach agreement quickly with your accuser while on the way to court, or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge hand you over to the warden, and you will be thrown into prison. I tell you the truth, you will never get out of there until you have paid the last penny. Jesus is trying to make very clear that that anger that festers leads to us not being reconciled in the way that we do. And he even uses it. If you come and you're bringing a sacrifice to the altar, but you're not living out the reconciliation that that altar represents, the altar, it represents you being reconciled to God. But if you are not living that with other people, leave it there. Because this altar is supposed to change your heart. And if it's not changing your heart, then go do the things that do. Reconcile with your brothers and sisters, reconciled with your neighbor, reconcile with those who have something against you. This is a really important message, because Jesus doesn't say, as it is written. He's saying, you've heard what people have said, because people are saying these things. They're not understanding what the law really is representing or trying to do. The law, people say, is just to change what is external to you. And Jesus is saying, no, the law is to draw your attention to what is internal to you, to what needs to change inside of you. And hopefully, you'll recognize that your sin is so great that you can't do it. Only Christ can do that. Once you recognize your great need, you'll be drawn to the only person in all heaven and earth that can do anything about it. But there's that danger of anger. Here it says in Ephesians 4:26-27, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on the cause of your anger. Do not give the devil an opportunity. That when you're angry, don't sin. It doesn't, now hear it, it doesn't say don't be angry. It says be angry. Whoa, be angry, but don't sin. You can be angry. Don't sin in that, because that's giving a footstool to the enemy in your life. That's when it can be used for the wrong thing. I think we can look at the life of Jesus and we can see the ways in which the anger led to something good. How about driving out the buyers and sellers in the women's court in the temple, when he drives out those who are buying and selling and exchanging money? He drove them out, made a whip of cords and got them out. He said, you've turned my father's house into a den of thieves. Like we need to be willing to do that. In our anger, if it's preventing us from reconciling, that's not good. There's a danger to anger, but there's also a demonstration of reconciliation that Jesus did for us. He did not look at us and say, I'll wait till you deserve it. Oh, thank goodness, right? At your literal worst, Christ died so that you can be saved. That means we should have the same heart. David, he didn't reconcile with his son. What did his anger lead him to do? It actually led him to just try to ignore the problem and not reconcile with his son. But he needed to satisfy that justice. One of my favorite movies is Les Miserables. There's like 3 versions. And back in the day, I read the book by Victor Hugo. It's I think it was like 1882, 62, something like that. But it's an old book, and I read the unabridged version. I don't recommend it. It's abridged for a version. A reason, because back in the day, at least I've been told, is that they would write these books and get paid by the word. So then they would go on these long diatribes. There's one, if you want to know about the Battle of Waterloo, there's like 300 pages about it. But in it, there's this priest or a bishop, and Jean Valjean just got out of prison. He had stolen bread, and he spent a lot of time in prison. And when he got out, he was a convict, and he had to tell people, and nobody wanted to help him. But this bishop came to him and said, you know what, you can stay with me. Come, I'll feed you, and I'll give you a place to stay. And it was very nice. But then Jean Valjean, in the middle of the night, he got up, because when he ate, he saw that this was silver. So in the middle of the night, he took all of the silver forks and spoons, he shoved them into the bag, and he left in the middle of the night. And on his way, some prisoners stopped him. They saw his papers, he's a convict. And he said, the priest gave them to me. And of course, they didn't believe him. So they drag him back to the priest, and the priest ought to be mad, right? That's silver, and you just stole that from me. But when the guards bring him in, this is the line from the priest. It says, "Ah, there you are," said the bishop. "I'm glad to see you. But I gave you the candlesticks also, which are silver like the rest, and which are worth 200 francs. Why did you not carry them away with your forks and spoons?" He turned to Valjean. And after they let him go, the priest said, "Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil, but to good. I have bought your soul from you. I withdraw it from dark thoughts and from the spirit of perdition, and I give it to God." Just that idea where the bishop could have been really angry. But when you think about when Jesus says someone takes from you like your jacket, give them your coat as well. This is worth a lot of money. And when he comes, he says, "I want to give you the candlesticks too. I want to show you so much love that you don't deserve, because that's what Christ did for us. We were bought at a price." 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. "Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own? You were bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God with your body." You were bought with a price. When Christ died on the cross for the sins of the world, he purchased you back from what is evil, what is not good. And if your body is not your own and it is Christ, and it ought to be Christ living in you, what would that look like? Sometimes there's oldness in us that needs to die, to go away. But by reconciling us to God, by purchasing us for a price, we too should be living as people who want others reconciled. It is so easy to just be angry at people and want the worst in them. When I had a roommate, his name was Sean. He had Crohn's disease. It was crippling for him, and he wasn't receiving any treatment at the time. And he came and he lived with us. And Crohn's disease really affects the intestines, and he would just walk like this all of the time. And I remember that when we went to the mall one day, we were in PacSun. And if you don't know anything about Crohn's disease, sometimes you can have gas, and it can be the worst thing you've maybe ever smelled in your life. And it's really bad. And I remember being in PacSun and people are talking, and something hit me, right? Like makes your eyes kind of water. And I looked at Sean immediately, and I said, "No, you didn't." And he was just like, "I'm sorry," But I was with people who didn't know this about Sean. And they didn't know, but I saw it was my cousin-in-law, I guess, but he was looking at a little kid. He was like, "That little kid did that. I know it." He was so angry. And you could see everybody in PacSun. They would be talking. They'd be like, "Yeah, so I was," and they just left. I have never seen an entire store just be hit by something so powerful that it immediately stops you mid-sentence and you just leave. But that's what it was. And I could see that my brother-in-law and my cousin-in-law, they were so angry. They didn't know it was him. And I did. And I was kind of like, "Seriously?" And he was like, "I'm sorry." See, but I knew that came from something broken in him. And we have to recognize that all of this sin is coming from something broken in them. All of it is something broken that we ought to want God to fix. And sometimes we want to usher people into the vengeance we want for them rather than to the fix that they need. We want to say, "Yes, please get what you deserve," versus, "Here, I want you to get what you don't deserve, because that's what I got." That's the ministry of reconciliation, wanting the best in people, even though it is very difficult to want that. You will want, when hurt, you will want them to be hurt. That's just natural. But that's what's old. God has something new for you, a heart that breaks for people, a heart that longs for people to receive what you have received, a tremendous grace that surpasses all understanding. You ought to want that for people. Romans 3:25 through 26. For God presented Jesus as a sacrifice for sin. People are made right with God when they believe that Jesus sacrificed his life, shedding his blood. This sacrifice shows that God was being fair when he held back and did not punish those who sinned in times past. So he was looking ahead and including them in what he would do in this present time. God did this to demonstrate his righteousness, for he himself is fair and just, and he makes sinners right in his sight when they believe in Jesus. So that reconciliation, when I talk about forgiveness, it's not about justice being ignored, it's about justice satisfied. You kind of see it with the priest in that idea where he took his own silver and gave it to him, even though that cost him something, because forgiveness cost you something. It's about saying that justice I want for you will be satisfied in many ways by me. I'll take it on me because I'm forgiving you. What does it look like when you forgive a debt? It doesn't go away. It's assumed by you. You owe me this. And by forgiving it, you're just saying, I will pay it by virtue of you not. That's what forgiveness looks like. You'll want to demand it. But will you forgive it? Justice not ignored, but satisfied. That's what forgiveness looks like. Who's satisfying that? But what you'll see, is that David, I said last week that David just gave his son sort of whatever he wants. But now David is being almost too harsh. Like he's trying to compensate maybe by saying, I won't even look at my son Absalom. I'm not even going to have anything to do with him. This is just going to lead to problems. Ephesians says this way, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but raise them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. The problem is that David had this demonstration of reconciliation in his life. Nathan came to him at his worst and said, the Lord has forgiven you. The Lord has forgiven you. Now, David should have run to Absalom and said, you need to seek out through repentance the same reconciliation that I received. Now, what made it work for David is he repented. And none of that is being asked for. He's just angry, and he's provoking his son to anger by doing nothing, by not investing in his son and talking to him in the way that he should. His son is stewing on this. And this woman, this sort of wise woman, is half telling the truth. When she says things like, God brings back the banished, and he finds ways to bring people to new life. This is all true. Except she says, and he never takes away life. Are you kidding me? It just happened to David. David lost his child that he had with Bathsheba, and it was God's doing. God does do these things. God is sovereign and in control. God has a plan that we do not see, and God is doing things that include the taking of life and the giving of life. And so she's not being honest. How does God reconcile and bring back? She just said, God finds ways. No, he shows a way through repentance. Repent of your sin, and you will be in front of a gracious and merciful master. And David should want that in his kids and call them out to do that, and he does nothing. And that is, then, we have the danger of anger, the demonstration of reconciliation, but it all starts with this, and it's a duty, and it's one that we don't like to hear, and it's the duty of confrontation. If I were to take a show of hands, not many people would be like, you know what I love? I just wish I could wake up every morning and do. I just want confrontation. More of it, please, I'm fishing for a good argument. Just something to really rile people up and maybe leave them angry at me forever, maybe. How cool would that be? Not many people are fishing for that. I tell my students this. What's going to make me hopefully unique in some ways is I'm willing to be hated by you if that's the cost of telling you the truth. You know, my brother, I love him. I love him. I love him. I love him. He's got a mental illness. He's got paranoid schizophrenia. And he's not allowed to own any sort of handgun or anything like that. And he would tell people that he was a part of law enforcement. This was part of a delusion of his. And he would have cards that said he was part of Homeland Security. And of course, with the advent of Amazon, you can buy anything on there. So he has a badge, a fake badge. And one day he came over to my house. I had a pretty good relationship with him, and he showed me this handgun. I said, "Oh, yeah, let me see it." And I took it, and I had it, and when it was time for him to leave, he said, "Oh, yeah, and I need that back." Now, I love my brother so, so much that I didn't give it back. And he was so angry. He started calling me the devil, and I was working for evil people. My fear was that he would brandish it and someone would maybe shoot him, right? My fear was that this would get him into a lot of trouble. He shouldn't have it. So I didn't give it back. That's not because I don't like him. It's because I love him so much that I'm willing for him to be angry at me. I'm willing for him to even hate me. I'm willing for him to say the worst things that he's ever said to me in my entire life because I love him. You got in the life of those you love, you must be willing even to be hated because of how much you love them. That's what Christ was willing to do. He went on that cross and bore the hate of people, the meanness, the malice. It was a willingness to say, because I love you, you can hate me as much as you want, but I will show you the truth. I will live out the truth to you. In my life, if the cost of telling you the truth is that you hate me, I will be hated by you. We must have that in us. That's a hard confrontation. But if I see someone walking down to a path that leads to sin and destruction, I will do everything in my power, even to the point of your hate, to get you to change. We must have that in us. David, it's his son. David is seeing that his son is living in sin to the point that he would kill his own brother, and he does nothing. Nothing. That just means that David did not experience the fullness of what reconciliation really is, because he would desire it so much for his son that he'd be willing to confront him and say, I love you. You got to change. You got to repent. Confrontation comes when we tell people, I love you, and you're on the wrong path, and it's because I love you that I want you to change. Avoiding issues only allows sin and resentment to fester. Galatians 6:1, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. There's this balance about how we interact. There's a temptation, not just for anger, but to also indulge maybe in the things that they're doing. But what Paul says is, you confront people in their sin. Matthew 18:15, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault when the two of you are alone. If he listens to you, you have regained your brother. In 1986, it was January 28th, the Challenger exploded, space shuttle. And when they did surveys afterwards, they realized that the reason, only after 73 seconds into the launch, that this explosion happened and people lost their lives, the only reason it happened is because of an O-ring issue. It didn't handle the elements very well, weather. Here's the problem. There were people who knew it, but were too unwilling to cause an issue and confront because they didn't want to slow things down. Like they didn't want to cause an issue. You know what? I think it's in all of us to be like, gosh, David as well, and you see it. The easiest thing is just to ignore it and hope it goes away. If you're going to have a ministry of reconciliation and God wants you to use you to reconcile people, hey, I'm sorry, but that includes confrontation. Now, Galatians says do it gently. There are ways of lovingly telling people that you want what's best for them, but they still may not like you because of it. You should have an unyielding love for people and a willingness to speak truth to them, because you may not get that moment back. That's the nature of life, man. The way things happen. The story I've told you a million times, and I will say it a million more because it's the only way I know how to use it. But I had that opportunity. Matt Sampson, man, he came to me one day. He got into drugs. He got fired. His life was spiraling out of control. And he came to me. He's like, Matt, I know you talk about Jesus all the time. I heard you talk about faith. My life is falling apart. He's like, what do I need? What do I need to do? And it was just, I don't know what it was. It was something stupid in my head that was like, I don't know, it's embarrassing to talk about it or something. I don't know what it was, but I looked at him and I said, I don't know, man. And I remember going home that night and thinking, what a stupid thing that I know what he needs. He needs Jesus. He needs Jesus in his life. He needs to submit and to repent and to fall totally and completely into the arms of a loving Savior. And I said, next time I see him, I'm going to have the boldness I need to have in telling him that. And a few weeks later, he died of a drug overdose. And I have lived with that as a constant and abiding reminder that you do not get moments back. Will you be willing to be embarrassed, to be hated, even to be hurt, to tell people what they must have in their life in order to be reconciled to God? I hope that we have that. Getting rid of the oldness and embracing the newness looks like a willing to confront people because we love them and we want what's best for them. There are people doing prison ministry right now, the people who've done the worst of the worst, right? They don't go there and say, wow, you guys are too far gone. They say, my goodness, these are people who need to be reconciled to God, and I'm willing to confront them in their sin through the ministry of reconciliation. Because if all I do is get stuck on their sin and get angry about it and don't do anything about it, then they're not going to experience what they need to experience in the fullness of what Christ can do for them. I don't know what that looks like in your life. I don't know where you're at right now. I don't know if you have anger in your heart or anything that's maybe preventing you from being reconciled to somebody. Here's the hardest thing is that you can't do their part for them. But you can lean into forgiveness. You can lean into reconciliation. You can go out and try something. You can go and say, I love you so much. I hope that this changes in your life. And it may not go well for you. I'm not promising you that it's going to be easy and it's going to go well. I'm promising you this, it's going to be worth it. It will be worth you trying to get people to experience the fullness of Christ in their life, because that's what we're called to do. And when you're leaning into the calling that God has for all of us, it will always be worth it. It will always be worth it. There's a danger to anger, but we have been demonstrated through what Christ did for us, a ministry of reconciliation. Your duty now is to be a little bit confrontational. And I hope all of you are willing to gently and in love do that for people in this world who are desperate for it. Let me pray that. Lord, this message is so much for me. God, continue to change my heart for people. God, I don't want to have hate in me. God, when people are so hard to love, may I see your face. May I see your outstretched arms, God, that were pierced because your embrace for the world is infinite in its love, infinite in its sacrifice, God, that we ought to be people who love like you love. And where we are deficient, God, may we rely totally and completely on you. We are nothing without you. Nothing without your power, nothing without your grace, nothing without the ministry of your Holy Spirit in us. We are not ours, but yours. You have purchased us with a price, God. Please help us to shed what is old, to embrace fully what is new. God, help us not to love the old things. Help us to realize the fullness of you who are in us, God, and battle against the one who is of the world. God, thank you that you died for us. Thank you for that ministry. God, thank you for the way that you equip us. God, I pray that everything we do, everything we say, that every way that we live, that would be intentional for your glory. God, if there are faces in our life that need more of you, may we be willing to confront them in love and truth because we love them, God. You confronted us in our sin when we were at our worst, not because you hated us, but because of your great love for us. Help us to have even the fraction of what that is. God, help us not to want the worst, but to the best in people. God, we love you. Thank you for this church. Thank you for all those who are here. Thank you for just the movement of your Spirit in this place. We love it. God, may you continue to just pour into our hearts and our minds. God, we want more of you and less of us. Help that to be true every day in us. Help us not to be people who just experience the newness on Sunday, God, but want to live out in that newness every day of the week from Monday to through Saturday, God. And we just thank you again that we can be your church in your precious and holy name. Amen.